they would be afraid of what we would lose if we lost religion. And I basically said, demonstrate.
Oh, you'd lose art and poetry and drama and narrative and
Why?
story.
Are there no godless artists and poets?
Well, there are artists and poets who think they're godless.
So we might have crossed over into a problem area.
Wow. All right. Hey everyone, Spitfiny Take Tano here, the internet's wettest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Kimbra album, Primal Heart. This is the third full-length commercial album from New Zealand native Kimbra, whose career was hugely boosted in the earlier part of the decade with an appearance on the smash breakout art pop hit, Somebody That I Used to Know. Kimbra dropped a pretty decent debut album the very same year titled Vows, a record that showcased quite a bit of vocal talent and artistic versatility. There were really kind of kooky, jazzy, sort of tongue-in-cheek numbers on here like the song Good Intent, but there was also very summery, lavish Baroque pop on this album, like on the track Something in the Way You Are. And instead of when moving on to her next album, kind of cutting things down and finding a more defined, a more focused sound, Kimbra sounded even more all over the map with her follow-up, The Golden Hour. In fact, there were some tracks on here like the song 90s Music that I think had even weirder production. Some of the beats on here were pretty synthetic, kind of spacey as well, a lot of sub-bass, a lot of booming beats, but still a lot of room for Kimbra's vocals to kind of ruminate. I got the sense that some of the songs and the production on this record almost felt like an attempt to keep up with fellow Kiwi Lorde, who blew up and had some viral hits just a year earlier. On this album, there were also some nods to contemporary hip-hop production with the rattling hi-hats and the tight, snappy snares and the huge sub-bass. But in the track list on this record, Kimbra still left a lot of room for stylistic detours, like the Disco Rager, Miracle, or the song Madhouse, which is essentially like this 80s throwback synth-funk anthem. That just seems to be Kimbra's thing. On each track list she has dropped so far, there just seems to be a library of pop styles embedded within. Not only that, but she also tends to wear her influences on her sleeve. To the point where I think her past couple of albums kind of lose a sense of continuity and identity. Her music can come off a little nondescript if she's drowning in a particular influence, or if a vocal performance is maybe so-so, or a song is kind of generic. And that's still kind of the issue on this new album over here as well, where I feel continuously caught by who it sounds like she's copying as opposed to what it is she's actually doing. Because throughout this record I hear hints of The Knife and Sia and Lorde and maybe a little bit of Radiohead or James Blake, Kate Bush. She really seems to be loving some Little Dragon on this one. There are a number of very pillowy, dreamy, glossy, synth-led art pop tracks on here that maybe aren't the feistiest in the track list, just seem kind of mild, like the song Like They Do on the TV, which features a very sensual sax part, as well as The Good War and Everybody Knows and Black Sky, some of which are decent cool-down moments in the midst of the track list, but are clearly overshadowed by some of the more vibrant and feistier songs here, with more tangible and upfront vocals. Especially Top of the World, super exciting, primal track. Even if the song just bleeds Fever Ray, just sounds so much like Karen Dreer Anderson. But it's like she's taking that influence into a brighter, more manic, more egotistical direction with these hypnotic dirty drums and really distorted heavy synth bass. It's a track that sounds simultaneously ancient and futuristic, and not a bad tune either. I'm having a hard time describing some of the vocals on this track though, because it doesn't purely sound like singing. It's also kind of a, I don't know, a shouty or a spoken word type thing. Either way, it's intense and portrays a ton of character, much more than some of the other tracks here do. The song Recovery is a really sharp blend of trap and pop, with this really heavy, bouncy bass synced up with these just gigantic chords. Some really sassy lead vocals. I love how the drums kind of pick up a little bit as the song progresses along. And the song has some really cute vocal harmonies as well hanging in the background, and it's essentially this really summery track about getting over a bad relationship, recovering from that, and I guess giving yourself a little time for self-love, learning to love yourself, learning more about yourself instead. The song Human is one of a few tracks on the album where Kimbra is like a dead ringer for Little Dragon's Yukimi Nagano, especially with some of her more subtle croons on this track and the background vocals. It's got kind of a different instrumental and songwriting style though, because Little Dragon isn't really much for the type of tune that we're hearing there, which is really dark, winding, and urgent, slowly blossoming into this really explosive chorus. I got a heart that's primal. The song Light Years sounds like a Forever 21 shopping spree set in the year 3000, with all these throbbing, pulsating, driving synths and sequence drums. Occasionally the synths get a little decent. There's also some really glossy, orgasmic chords on the chorus. Also, some of the best singing on the entire record too. I mean, when Kimber squeezes out that one note in her upper register before the song blasts into the hook, ugh. The song Right Direction is a nice tune. It's one of the better ballads on the record, certainly not as washed out as some of the other more low-key tracks here. It feels like a very intimate little tune set in the mid-80s with a very heavy and powerful string-backed ending. Good progression. The song Past Love, I like the vibe of this track a lot. There's something about the instrumentation that feels kind of dreamy and nostalgic, much in the same way that you might find like on a She and Him or a Best Coast track, but it actually feels not too nostalgic. It doesn't feel dated. It doesn't feel trashy. It feels classy. It feels sharp. It feels smart. My real issue with the song, though, is how are you going to have two summery pop tunes on here about getting over an old relationship and then emphasizing that you need to focus more on loving yourself instead? Which leads me to another criticism I have of this album, that lyrically, topically, it can be kind of surface level. You know, there's some limitations here. The song Version of Me helps pull up the rear of this album and helps end things off in stereotypically sad and dark fashion, but it's actually not a bad track. It's kind of a painfully intimate, claustrophobically close piano ballad that sounds like it could have landed on Radiohead's
A Moon-Shaped Pool.
Which, love that album. I think the song's pretty good. It's not really an influence I mind hearing pop up, even if it does kind of add to this album's lack of consistency. I will say, though, the real closer of this record that comes after this 2-minute little vocal interlude with some weird James Blake-ish vocal meshing, that does not go over quite as well, and almost feels like a cop-out of an ending. Still, though, even at its worst, this album is very listenable. There's not really anything on here I outright hated. There wasn't anything so bland, so plain, so average that it just felt gross. I mean, even the more low-key cuts on here, while they may not stand out, while they may not be super vibrant, they still have decent choruses, decent vocal performances that I find myself coming away from humming. I just wish the actual production and performances of these tracks were a bit more interesting and lively. Because it's not merely that these songs are low-key. I mean, the song Human is a pretty low-key track, but the way that the synths are produced on that track, the way that the vocals are kind of twisted into these very dark alleyways, it's incredibly creative. It's a really interesting sound, which is not something I can say for some of the more washed out songs in the track list. Still, there were more highs than lows on this mixed bag of tracks, which kind of runs like a compilation, because still to this day, with album after album, there is still really no common musical or sonic thread that pulls all of Kimber's records together. As an artist, she's a bit of a chameleon, kind of an all-arounder, a Swiss Army knife. She does a little bit of everything, and I will say, with years of practice, it seems like at everything, she's gotten a little bit better, but without a specialty or a trademark sound, it still kind of feels like, as good as this album is, it's missing that extra spark, that little extra something. I'm feeling a strong 6 to a light 7 on this thing. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best. You're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Kimbra, forever.